The dust of Alexander the Great's empire had long since settled into rival kingdoms, each ruled by his successors, the Diadochi. By 217 BC, the Hellenistic world was divided among the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in Asia, the Antigonids in Macedon, and smaller realms in Greece and Anatolia. Yet the duel between Egypt and Syria, Coele Syria, the land of the Levant, remained fiercely contested. In the spring of that year, Antiochus III, king of the Seleucid Empire, crossed into southern Syria at the head of a massive army. Antiochus brought a comparable, slightly smaller, but battle-tested army. His force was set up as follows. On the Seleucid left, 50 Indian war elephants, larger and stronger than those of Ptolemy's, each carrying towers with archers and javelin men, strong contingents of 3,000 Greek and Parthian cavalry, with an additional 10,000 light infantry consisting of Illyrian, Thracian, and other Greek mercenaries. These warriors had been a reliable stable throughout the Hellenistic period, serving both Alexander and his father, King Philip, before him. The Seleucid center consisted of 20,000 silver-shield phalangites, trained in the traditional Macedonian style of warfare, forming the backbone of the army, as well as 10,000 argyraspides, or silver shields, elite veterans renowned for their discipline. These warriors were the cream of the crop for ancient Hellenistic armies. They were usually the most experienced in battle, equipped with the finest and latest equipment and weaponry, and were exceptionally armored, making them a complete nightmare to face directly on the battlefield. On the Seleucid right, Antiochus himself commanded 3,000 heavy Greek and Macedonian cavalry. The right flank was the traditional position of honor in Hellenistic warfare. They were supported by Indian elephants at the forefront, with additional Cretan skirmishers and light infantry. Antiochus, for his part, was fresh from a string of victories in the north. He had crushed rebellions, reasserted Seleucid control in Media and Parthia, and marched west with an air of confidence about him. His army, disciplined, large, and hardened, was a mirror of Alexander's, a grand engine of war. Opposing Antiochus, the young Ptolemy IV Philopator, often derided by historians as indolent and effeminate, was compelled by necessity to take the field in person, for the fate of Egypt's empire now rested in his hands. Ptolemy's force, the largest Egyptian army seen since the days of the early pharaohs, was a patchwork of peoples and nations. His right flank was vast. It consisted of North African war elephants, who were smaller compared to the Seleucid Indian variants, with Thracian and Gallic mercenaries, as well as Greek mercenaries from Achaia, Crete, and Thessaly in the ranks. The Ptolemaic center was the core of the Egyptian army, made up of 25,000 heavy phalangites armed with sarissas and deployed in a dense formation, as well as 20,000 Egyptian soldiers, newly trained and equipped in the Macedonian style. These were the first native Egyptians allowed to serve in the royal army since Alexander's conquest. The Ptolemaic left was commanded by Ptolemy himself. Though Ptolemy was no seasoned warrior, he had surrounded himself with men who were experienced generals from across Greece. 3,000 heavy cavalry from Thessaly and Macedon made up his elite cavalry strike force, with the remainder of his African elephants at the forefront. And lastly, a few thousand light Libyan infantry, as well as Nubian javelin men and other mercenaries that supported Ptolemy's cavalry. The largest battle of the Hellenistic world was about to unfold, here on the arid landscape of Raphia. At dawn, trumpets blared, and the Seleucid elephants advanced. The sheer size and weight of the Indian variants caused a loud but distinguished ground shake across the battlefield. Ptolemy attempted to counter. He sent forth his African elephants to stave the enemy's advance. Antiochus's larger Indian elephants charged aggressively against Ptolemy's, but the African elephants, smaller and less accustomed to the towering Indian variants, faltered. Many turned in panic and fled. Ancient historian Polybius notes that the African elephants were not accustomed to the smell and size of their Indian counterparts, which in turn led to their overwhelming fear. This created disorder on the Ptolemaic left. In their retreat, they trampled through their own men. Antiochus's Indian elephants pressed forward, driving back the Egyptian beasts. Antiochus seized the moment. He led his heavy cavalry forward with a thunderous charge, personally driving into Ptolemy's flank. Dust rose in great clouds as rider clashed with rider, spears met shields. The Ptolemaic left buckled and gave ground. With such a rapid and successful advance, it seemed as though the Seleucid king would seize the day there and then. Antiochus's cavalry, gaining momentum in addition to the support from his Indian elephants, granted them overwhelming favor. His men drove back the Ptolemaic left. Antiochus, aiming to capitalize on his swift, successful maneuver, signaled to his commanding officers to send forth the rest of their right flank. With that, the Cretan light infantry on the Seleucid right stormed forward directly towards the Libyan infantry on Ptolemy's left. Antiochus was aiming for a complete blitz of the Ptolemaic left flank. If effective, then it would completely expose Ptolemy's left, leaving his entire army vulnerable from the flank and rear. But Antiochus, whether intentional or not, continued to pursue Ptolemy too far, to the point where he was physically removed from the oversight of the rest of the battlefield. Perhaps Antiochus believed that pursuing and killing Ptolemy would have ended the battle swiftly, or perhaps he had just lost control of his cavalry contingents. Whatever the case, by removing himself from the battle would turn out to be a critical mistake. In the heat of their retreat, Ptolemy and some of his commanders were able to slip away and regroup at the center, effectively taking full command of the rest of his army. But before Ptolemy had returned to take command of his center, the Seleucid Greek infantry had swiftly overwhelmed and routed Ptolemy's Libyan infantry. The Cretan Greeks had followed their commander's lead, giving relentless pursuit, chasing the Libyans miles from the battlefield. By now, the entirety of the Seleucid right flank, as well as the entirety of the Ptolemaic left flank, was completely removed from the battlefield. Now, Ptolemy's trusted commander of the right flank, Echecrates of Thessaly, took the initiative, advancing the entirety of his force to counterattack the Seleucid left. Ptolemaic soldiers from nations all across the Mediterranean marched in lockstep. The migrating Galatians made up the bulk of the force. These were hardy Celts who had migrated from Gaul to Anatolia centuries prior. Greeks from Illyria, Achaea, Crete, Thessaly, and even Thracians. The cavalry mainly Greek from Thessaly, with Libyan cavalry in support. Following close behind was the Ptolemaic center, now commanded by Ptolemy himself, having successfully escaped the chase from Antiochus. His center was a vast sea of Macedonians and native Egyptians, trained in the Macedonian manner. Armed with long sarissa pikes, some 45,000 troops advanced fearlessly toward the Seleucid center. The Seleucids, in contrast, had their own vast contingents of sarissa pikemen. Their elite silver shields, as well as Macedonian phalangites, made up their core center. These were exceptionally equipped and professionally trained soldiers who were seasoned veterans and progressively more battle-tested than that of their Egyptian foes. The Egyptian right made first contact. They smashed into the Seleucid left, cavalry head first, causing a mass of shock and chaos. The infantry followed up with a thunderous charge. One major factor which stood out was their significant numerical disadvantage. With roughly 30,000 troops, the Seleucid pikemen were outnumbered by a major factor of 15,000 men. An advantage surely large enough to sway the tide of any battle. With Antiochus absent from the main field, Ptolemy's infantry gained the upper hand. The Seleucid left giving ground under pressure. The Macedonian phalanx of Ptolemy and his native Egyptian troops advanced with sarissas locked, pointing straight ahead. They marched slowly, advancing like an ancient war machine. The Seleucid phalanx, undeterred, stood their ground and met them head-on. The air soon filled with the cries of men and the clash of metal. For hours, the two walls of men pushed, stabbed, and shouted, locked in deadly contest. The chaos was horrific. Men were impaled, stabbed, and even lacerated by the thousands of sharp-pointed metal tips. Ptolemy, calm amid the chaos, advanced at the head of his central line, his presence rallying the men. For the first time in the war, he appeared not as a decadent monarch, but as a true king. The Egyptian-trained phalanx, fighting for their homeland, fought with unexpected ferocity. The Seleucid center began to waver. Dust and blood obscured the field, but the Egyptian line held steady, driving forward step by step. The Seleucid center broke. Panic spread through the ranks as the Argyraspides and Macedonians fell back, their lines shattered. When Antiochus had finally returned back to the battlefield, he saw, to his horror, that his renowned phalanx had collapsed. He tried to rally them, but the tide had turned and it was already too late. By midday, the field belonged to Ptolemy. Antiochus, realizing all was lost, withdrew with the remnants of his army toward Gaza. Over 10,000 Seleucid soldiers lay dead, and 4,000 were captured. Ptolemy's losses were around 1,500 men. Ptolemy IV had won one of the largest battles of the Hellenistic age, a victory that secured Coele Syria for Egypt once more.